Perhaps you will be unsurprised to learn about this new thing from Axios. Distrust in political, media, and business leaders sweeps the globe. So I'm going to give you some more specifics on it in this article. People also don't think media or business leaders are telling them the truth, and this suspicion of multiple special institutions is pushing people into smaller, more insular circles of trust. Government leaders and journalists are considered the least trustworthy societal leaders, according to Edelman's new 2022 Global Trust Barometer, a survey of 35,000 respondents across 28 countries. A majority of people globally believe journalists, 67%, government leaders, 66%, and business executives, 63%, are, quote, purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. Around the world, people fear the media is becoming more sensational for commercial gain, and the government leaders continue to exploit divisions for political gain. People who live in democracies are quickly losing trust in those democracies, while trust in authoritarian regimes, in China, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, for example, is increasing among people who live under them. Wow. As trust in democratic institutions wanes, there are also growing doubts about capitalism. Developed democracies specifically lack economic optimism, per the survey. A trust gap has also increased between wealthy and low-income populations. As people become more skeptical of institutions, they are increasingly leaning into closer circles of trust. Throughout the pandemic, survey respondents say trust in people from other countries and people who live in other states, provinces, or regions has gone down, while trust in neighbors and coworkers has increased. Yeah, see, this is... look, it's a good sign of the current decline of not just the American empire, but the decline of the West more generally. Because as you become more skeptical of everything, your circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and now you're just at like friends, neighbors, and coworkers as the only people you trust. There's basically no big institutions that you trust. And listen, that's totally reasonable and understandable. In fact, it's something I myself feel, of course, because nobody's looking out for you among the group they listed. What business leaders have, your concern in mind? What business leaders? Do corporate CEOs care about you? No. They care about, making their workers' wages lower and, padding the bottom line with more profit by any means necessary. Are politicians looking out for you? No. This is why the approval rating in Congress goes back and forth between 7% and 25% when it's at its highest. Because everybody knows they're not representing us. Everybody's on to the game. They might not know all the specifics, but there's this intuitive sense that people get. They're not looking out for us. And there was that study from Princeton years ago that came out, which found that there's basically no correlation between the policies Americans want and what we end up getting. And the direct connection is between what the elite want and what they end up getting, whether it's corporations or billionaires. So the donor class gets what they want, and there's no correlation between what the people want and what we end up getting. Why would you trust politicians under that circumstance? They're wearing it on their sleeve how bad they are. It's an oligarchy. It's a kleptocracy. That's what we're currently living in. That's what it is functionally. Forget on paper. Forget what it nominally is. Has it actually functioned? Like an oligarchy, like a kleptocracy. So, and then the media, don't even get me started on the media. There's so many problems with mainstream media. It's endless. So, just take the big networks, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. CNN and MSNBC are biased in favor of the Democratic establishment. Now, don't get it twisted. Some people misinterpret that as, they have a left-wing bias. That's not a left-wing bias. A left-wing bias would be a bias in favor of left-wing policies, such as raising the minimum wage, more unions, universal health care, ending wars, so on and so forth. They don't believe those things at all. They view their job as to give people roughly what's happening in the world, but then also defend the Democratic establishment. That's what they do. Now, Fox News defends the Republican establishment. So you have incredibly biased and partisan news and defense of the status quo and business as usual and the establishment. On Fox News, it's for the Republicans. On CNN and MSNBC, it's the Democrats. And then you have, local news, for example, which generally does have higher trust than national news. But even at the local news, what do? They just scare you about petty crime that's going on in your area. There's no big talk of systemic problems. There's no talk of, national trends that are way more important, that affect your life way more. It's just, be scared of the convenience store getting robbed or whatever the hell it is. So you have all these institutions, none of them are looking out for you. And then the thing on sensationalism, well, that's obviously true. That's why you see, they'll talk about something with Trump that has nothing to do with anything because it'll get clicks. Or they'll bring up Kim and Kanye West because that'll get clicks. So there are all these different biases that mainstream media has. And everybody's seeing it more now because there's been some very egregious examples of it recently. And look, this isn't to say, for example, that Joe Rogan has, that I agree with him on COVID stuff. I definitely don't. I have many disagreements with him on COVID stuff, and perhaps him and I will get into that whenever the next time is that I'm on his show. But like when they did the whole Joe Rogan took horse paste, took horse medicine, that's just not true. That's not true. He took the human version of ivermectin. Now, granted, ivermectin has massively mixed results for how effective it is with treating COVID-19. And, but they could have said that. They didn't say that. They said, oh, he's taking horse medicine. Well, a lot of people looked at that and they were like, you're trying to portray this in the most negative light possible because you don't like this guy. That's not honest. It's not. And so the distrust is absolutely positively earned. It's earned. You should distrust these people. And then new media, listen, I'm part of new media. I'm part of independent media. So I have every reason in the world to try to, bolster this field. And in many ways, I do feel like we do a much better job than others. But new media comes with its own baggage as well. And that's obvious. Because for every good person doing good work in new media, there's a charlatan pushing some bogus narrative and getting millions of views. And so there's ups and there's downs to new media as well, but people don't know who to trust, where to look, and all that stuff anymore. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong to feel that way. The interesting part is the trust in the authoritarian regimes growing stronger. Now, why is that? My guess is, and I don't know, you'd have to do more academic research on this to figure out the real reasons, and maybe more opinion polls, you get a much better sense of it. But my guess is that in authoritarian countries, since there's like total control, they're able to make changes and implement things way more effectively and efficiently. And so, because there isn't the messiness that we have in this country, for example. Like our institutions, I mean, the only thing that's still functioning are like the Fed pumps trillions of dollars into corporate America whenever the hell they want. That's still working. And then the judiciary does more legislating than like Congress and the executive branch does. Okay, so those are the things that are working. Everything else is just messy and it goes nowhere and you're always in gridlock. But when it comes to authoritarian regimes, they could just decide, we're going to do this thing, and then they just do it. And so, effectively, if the trains are running on time, as the old saying goes, and in these countries they are, people are going to feel like, well, we got everything more or less under control over here, and we're doing okay. And this, look, the standard of living. Look, I have many criticisms of China, and I can get into all of them. But the fact of the matter is, people are being lifted out of poverty right now there. They are. There is an upward trend that's currently happening. So when you live in a country that's more or less improving year after year, people are going to feel like, yeah, I have more trust in these leaders. So a lot of hard lessons in here for the West. And I don't think they're going to learn them. I don't think they're going to course correct. It's kind of weird looking at the inevitable decline happen in real time, knowing there's almost nothing we can do to stop it. We got to try our best. We got to try to fix the system. We got to try to bring back a robust, functioning social safety net and welfare state. We have to try to end the wars and, untangle the imperialism and all that stuff. But it's strange watching it happen in real time, the drastic decline of an empire. And that's exactly what's happening. And these numbers are reflecting it, not just in the U.S., but all in the Western world. People have no trust in the institutions because they shouldn't. Final thing, look, COVID's a great example. How many times did the CDC and the FDA and the authorities get stuff wrong? I mean, Fauci early on was saying, no, don't use masks. You don't need to use it. What? They mocked the idea of the lab leak theory early on. It was considered misinformation. Then we learned, hey, that's actually probably the most likely thing that happened. They just came out and admitted, hey, cloth masks don't really work that well. The N95s do, and KN95s are a little worse than the N95s, but they're better than the cloth. But the cloths don't work that well. They just admitted that now. We're 2 years into the pandemic. Rand Paul said something like that, and then he was banned from one of the social media outlets because he said the cloth mask thing when the study had come out originally, which is a while ago. So yeah, people are losing trust because it's so clear. Nobody's steering the ship. Nobody knows what they're doing. And that's just such a clear example of it with everything that happened with COVID and with the messaging screw-ups and the lack of leadership, and our decentralized healthcare system led to our worst possible reaction to this pandemic. Any place that has a centralized healthcare system fared way better than we did because we're so decentralized and fractured and factionalized that when you make a change, it doesn't necessarily get to all the places it needs to get to. So there you have it. The distrust is earned, and that's obvious. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.